Hey there, I'm Mark from Spectrum Pulse, and today we have from Lizzy McAlpine, Older. You know, 5 Seconds Flat was such a good pop folk album. It had one of my favorite songs of 2022. It was in my top 5. That song was Doomsday, a theatrical epic, and it wasn't Ceilings, the TikTok viral breakthrough that got Lizzy McAlpine scooped up by RCA, who, knowing that label, would really want to recapture that exact sound and virality as many times as possible. Hence, we've got Older, featuring a lot of that delicate, soft-spoken acoustic pop folk with producer Mason Stoops, who does a passable but not exceptional job making a lot of these arrangements sound very similar very fast. Now look, I get intimacy and appearing more real by stripping it all down, something McAlpine stressed in comparison with 5 Seconds Flat, where to her by the very end of her tour she just could not connect with those bigger theatrical arrangements emotionally. Now I would argue that all music at the end of the day is on some form a performance to recapture those emotions that sit at the core of the song, but that's also not really the issue there. Let's not dig into that rabbit hole. I mean, just this past week, I have reviewed acts who have a more restrained presentation, but the emotionality did ring through, often enhanced by very low-key mixes. But Stoops' approach is to sandblast any warmer textures out of these songs with so much production polish and arranged orchestration, paired with more abbreviated song structures that are very clearly built for TikTok, and so much of that theatrical flair kind of evaporates in the execution and reveals rather milquetoast compositions and hooks when we get hooks at all. Now that was one of her biggest strengths as a performer, one of the reasons I liked all those bigger moments on 5 Seconds Flat. That helped her stand out from the crowd. We have no shortage of soft-spoken, delicate songs driven by acoustic guitar and piano about troubled relationships. Now paradoxically, the songs that are doing a little bit more with the woodwinds and guitar smolder on All Falls Down, or the sandy drums and pianos on Vortex, or especially I Guess as the outro erupts with the horns and strings, they kind of leave me wondering why more of those instrumental ideas were not spread across the entire project. Although I guess it's better than a song like Broken Glass, which really blows out the drums and tries to ramp into some darker territory and winds up balking on any real crescendo. And full disclosure, this was all intended as a shorter review because I honestly didn't think I had much to say beyond that, and honestly, this is coming across pretty negative, but I did go to a couple friends who liked this a lot more, and the overall appeal became a little clearer. It kind of unlocked for me, mostly through examinations of the lyrics and content. I mean, the back and forth of a bad relationship might be kind of basic, but the details flesh out a more unique picture. His alcoholism, her self-doubt to end it on staying and better than this, the anxious feeling on drunk running that potentially she feels partially responsible for some of his demons, the creeping dread on the closer Vortex as to why she can't get over this guy who has become a focal point of so much of her very introspective music and art, the feeling that she's also not really growing as a person as she keeps going back, even as every warning sign is there and she knows it, that they just don't really work. Hell, that's as easy as come down soon. As someone who has had relationships with some folks who have had, let's call it self-destructive impulses, I get what that can do to one's sense of self. You feel yourself changing in ways you don't want, and you struggle to control it. On some level, this is an album that's just riding through the collapse, kind of even going through the motions. Think Beck's Sea Change, and hoping that you'll have something of yourself by the very end when it's all said and done. I get the intentions, but man, the execution's not helping. A big part is how McAlpine stays in her softest register, and she is so technically competent. The Berkeley is definitely there in controlling some of those messier emotions in her delivery, but you run the big risk of coming out a little too composed, and given the attempts at more visceral lyrical choices, the delivery doesn't match all that well on songs like, I don't know, Broken Glass. To make a country comparison, it's very Carly Pearce before 29 Written in Stone, where her divorce described on that album shook that refined delivery to the core and made her so much more relatable. You could tell how much emotion was required to dig herself out. And I gotta say it, the production choices might be worse. When it's so polished, when the atmosphere feels so prim and honestly kind of underdeveloped, where every crescendo never quite explodes, it creates the impression that the weight isn't translating, and not in the way McAlpine presumes. Not that she isn't learning, but the angst isn't translating to punch deeper. Now, that probably will lead to more mainstream accessibility. I would not be surprised at all if a song or two from this went viral on TikTok. It feels very purposely built for it. I guess that's the modern industry. But when I can spot the calculation behind the art, when I'm also being told it's all being done to showcase realness, there's a tension that I'm not convinced McAlpine can sustain here. That's not saying Older is bad. McAlpine is a good singer. The writing feels lived in with some of the right details. The emotionality is very clear. And even if I think it's a big mistake to jettison your big swing for something so restrained and homogenous, I get the intent, but between the sterile production and the compositions that don't take enough chances, I'm not convinced she stuck the landing. It's not bad, just nowhere near as special. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you want to see more, please be sure to like, share, drop comments, and subscribe. I know I'm not making any fans with this. Believe me, I really wanted to love this album, but it was not clicking. I really struggled with it, and as I understood more of it, it just came to frustrate me all the more. Again, it's not a bad project, it's just nowhere near as good as it could have been. And yeah, I do blame RCA for the majority of that. Beyond that though, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. And if y'all want to find a place to argue with me on my Discord, or hell, just support the channel, get albums on my schedule, link to my Patreon right over there. Once again, don't feel obligated, tough times, I'll be alright, I understand, but the option's available. Till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.